there are 5,000 plus universities in the US, and if you go and try to list down the advantages of each, you will go crazy. So start with a large number, say 100, 150, and then keep funneling it down to eventually come to your dream list of 15, 20 universities that you're keen on applying to.
Welcome back to the College Crest podcast, where we help you navigate the college journey. And on this episode, we are talking about finding the right fit college. I'm your host, Nishan. With me is Malay, who is going to the university very soon. And he would be talking about how did he go about finding the right fit university. So Malay, welcome to the show.
Hi, sir. Thank you so much for having me. And so I hope today we're able to talk about how you find the right fit university and get into the real depth of how important research is in the application cycle to the US.
Definitely. So Malay, maybe you can talk about very quickly where you are headed, and then we go into
Perfect.
breaking
So
down the components of research.
I'm headed to Dartmouth College for the class of 2028. I'd applied and I'll be going in fall of 2024 this year. And I'm looking forward to the entire experience. And I hope through this deep, insightful podcast, get into the various factors of what enabled me to apply to Dartmouth and whether those factors can be applicable to you guys as well.
Great, Malay, right? And I think it's a very important topic because a lot of time when we work with students, right, the common thing I hear is we want to get to a top ranked college or we want to go to Ivy League. And I think more often than not, the discussion that we have with the students and the parents, especially, is it's not about going to the rank one college. It's about finding the right fit, right? So maybe we can start with explaining what is right fit, and then we can understand what are different factors to find the right fit college.
Perfect. So I completely agree with you. So while reputation and the rankings of a university do play a certain part, they're not the be all and end all in itself. And a lot of students often feel that if I go to the number one ranked college, I'm going to the best college possible. But there are so many more factors that constantly keep evolving, which matter more than the number one ranking of a university. The factors could be things like financial aid, whether the university offers the major that you want, the class sizes, the overall size of the campus, the alumni network. There's so many different constantly interlapping things which will also play a bigger role or have a bigger metric in deciding which university is the right fit for you.
Right. So if we have to define what's the right fit, how would you say, okay, why probably Dartmouth is the right fit for you? So if you can help the audience with that, that would be really great.
Perfect. So as I mentioned, the different factors are quite limitless. You can keep finding different factors that help in deciding which university where you would fit in best. So when you're applying to a university, you know, imagine for the next 4 years of your life, whether you feel you will be valued, whether you feel you'll be an integral part of this university. It is not about saying that I went to the number one university in this major, but rather I went to a university where I loved the campus, I loved the extracurricular activities, I loved everything about it. I liked the community, the professors, the alumni network, the internship opportunities. These are the small things when you're actually living on campus for those 4 years, you will value more than a ranking or a reputation number in terms of the overall scheme of things. So when I chose Dartmouth, for me, more important factors than the rankings and the name were rather what financial aid does this university provide to me? What are the majors it is have? That are the majors in overlapping and interlinked with what I want to pursue in the future? What is the
Right.
alumni network looking like? What are the internship opportunities? How wonderfully, beautifully integrated is this community? How tight knit are they? What are the professors like? What is the research they do? So these are the small factors which we will, of course, put in a sequential order of importance. Again, all of this is subjective, but these things always take more importance than the name, the reputation, and the rankings. So a very big misconception or a myopic thinking standpoint is that I will go for the best university, but you need to imagine yourself living in that university for 4 years. And if you do not fit in, that's not the right choice.
Right. So makes sense, Malay, what you're saying, right? And I think that's one way of looking at what's the right fit university is. And you spoke about multiple components or factors to consider. So could we talk about maybe the top five, right? I know the list can be very long, but if we, consider top five, which might have the maximum weightage according to you, let's talk about those factors in making that decision. What's a good fit or a right fit for a potential student?
Okay, so if you're putting only top five, of course, the list is quite long, but let's start with the most important, which is your major. So if you're going to say University of Pennsylvania or Wharton to study engineering, that's of course going wrong, right? So you have to go to the university where you will find the major. So of course, a Caltech, a MIT would rank higher than a university like UPenn, which is focusing on business, Wharton. While there are different schools in UPenn as well, you need to identify which school provides you the best access of opportunity in terms of the major you're pursuing. So for me, to step back and use my example, Dartmouth has a good economics and quantitative social science trend in the university. A lot of students take that course. The faculty is quite amazing, which is why I eventually chose Dartmouth. So this is the number one thing you need to consider, that major always takes dominance over everything else because education is what you're going for to the US. Number two, I say it depends on the circumstances of a student, but for me, financial aid was an important factor. Availability of scholarships, need aware, need blind universities, all of these also play a part. And I would highly recommend all students you should consider the financials involved before going and studying abroad, and consult the same with your parents. Number three would be the extracurricular activities, the community, the campus life, how the university is, what their main core values are, what activities do they offer. So Dartmouth has the Dartmouth Outing Club, which I'm quite interested in taking part in. So you need to identify the uniqueness of a university based on the activities and whether you feel you'll be able to fit in well into that crowd, into that community. Number four, which I think is quite important in the later stages of your journey in the US, is the alumni network. And you cannot take it for granted the alumni network a university has, because a good alumni network will help you in every internship, every job opportunity, every future outlook that you look to have beyond your university. It's a tight group of people who will always boost you forward career-wise when you keep moving forward from job to job in the future. So alumni network is something you should never ever take lightly. And number five can be a varying list of factors depending on what interests you the most. It could be things like location. Are you close to your relatives? It could be things like temperature. Are you scared of the extreme cold, or are you looking forward to the extreme cold? It could also be things like class size. How big is your class? Do you like 50, 100 people in a class, or do you like small classes of 20 to 30 people? So all of these things play a lot of importance in deciding this, but I would say these would be the top five factors in order, which is, again, to summarize: number one, it would be your major; number two, financial aid; number three, the activities; alumni network is number four; and number five would be class size, location, and things like that.
Right, good. And I think these really, you have hit the head on the nail, right? So, because these are very, very important, and sometimes one factor might be having more weightage for the students, right? So, I know students who have dropped the university because of the location, because they can't bear the kind of cold, right, in those regions, right? So those becomes very important for some students versus the financial aid, and for others, the financial aid might be the key thing when they are deciding on the right fit university, right? So, and what's a good way, right? Because while these five factors are important, what's a good way to start research, and how do you start comparing and contrasting these factors?
Correct. So when you start your journey, you're about a 1.5 years or so before, when you just enter your junior year in high school, you have a year and a half to complete your entire application. So I think research is the number one thing you should start with as early as possible, because research is limitless. Each university website has a lot of layers to it. You can keep going further and further, and the research could be never ending. And I too struggled with that at one point, where I kept on finding new information about a university, but kept changing my outlook and perception of it. So I would say start as early as possible, because more than your application, you need to know, and need to have the clarity that where do I want to apply. And then you need to sync it up with your application and see whether I would be a good fit in this based on my grades, my extracurriculars, and things like that, and whether I would be having a good chance of getting accepted. So that is something we will come to later. But the first thing is to identify where your passion lies. Which university are you the most keen on going? And that will only start when you get the research in place. So start early with the research. Number two, research is not only about identifying a university, it will also help you in your supplemental essays. To get into the understanding of how do you do the research, we will have a separate podcast or a video uploaded later on about how you can get to a website, what links you're supposed to look at, how exactly do you unfold the different questions about the major, the campus life, things like that. So we'll look into that in depth later on as well. But understand that starting early will always hold you in good stead for the future years.
Right. And I think, as you highlighted, research is a very important aspect, right? So one tip I think that you shared with us is starting early. So Malay, are there other frameworks or suggestion in terms of, how the research process should be?
All right, yeah. So when I was doing my research, I realized that having an Excel sheet or spreadsheet or like a Word doc to have the list of different things of a university was quite helpful. This also comes in handy later on for your supplemental essays. So I always say that create one large Excel file with about maybe 50, 100 universities have researched on, okay? And then keep writing the factors. What does this university have the major I want? Yes, no. Does it offer the sports I'm looking for? Yes, no. You keep putting those factors, and like a funnel, you start with about 100 universities, you reduce it to 50, you reduce it to 20, and eventually you find the universities you're most keen on applying, and then you divide it. Do I want to apply to this university in the early cycle or in the regular cycle? So it's always a funnel down method. There are 5,000 plus universities in the US, and if you go and try to list down the advantages of each, you will go crazy. So start with a large number, say 100, 150, and then keep funneling it down to eventually come to your dream list of 15, 20 universities you're keen on applying to. And then again, identify the segregation of which cycle you'll apply to where. An Excel sheet will always be very good for this. It gives you a very demarcated understanding of whether the university meets your requirements, and having a further on Word document for each to list down the points, the negatives, the positives is also very helpful. This is all what I did, and it also helped me in my supplemental essays in the future.
Right. And I think that's an interesting point. And at this stage, I want to ask, because that's another important question that comes our way. What's a good number of university to apply to? Right. So while you can research in 3 digits, right, ultimately I see a lot of students applying in a single digit or a double digit number. So what's a good range, Malay, in terms of applying to these universities?
Correct. Yeah. So the thing is, each school, each high school has a different set of rules to apply to universities, so that's equal competition amongst their students. So without getting into that, I would always recommend that having your applications in the range of 10 to 12 cannot hurt you. I think more than that, then you're overdoing it. You will not be able to give importance to individual applications. Understand that it's not about quantity, it's about the quality of your applications. There are students who apply to as little as 3 universities, but they're confident that I'm going to get into these universities, and that's the way to go. Doesn't mean that I would recommend everyone to do that, because there's a lot of luck involved at the end of the day between your universities. So I say 10 is a fantastic number to apply. Have 5 early or 6 early, and then 4 to 5 in the regular decision applications. The reason I'm saying this is because the more time you have for each essay, for each extracurricular activity, and to understand the intricacies of a university, the better. If you apply to 25, 30 universities using Common App and Coalition App, you will be jack of all, master of none. Because at the end of the day, each university essay is very unique and very different and requires a lot of your time. So do not spend time doing 30 different applications. Focus on, it could be in single digits, it could be 10, 12 applications. Focus on cracking those brilliantly well, and then move on to the next bit. This, of course, doesn't include the UCs. The UCs are one application in itself, so you can exclude that. But I'm saying other universities, generally in the US, 10 to 12 is a perfect number. Even less than that, you can't go wrong with that.
Right. And I think that's a good number to look at, right? And also, one philosophy that we work with a lot of students to say, we can also divide them into, so to say, a dream or aspiration university. Universities where we believe, you have a very high chances of getting admit, right? So which is mostly the right fit in terms of the scores and other credentials that you have built, because that also becomes an important criteria as you shortlist this university, your SAT scores, your AP scores, your academic qualification, the kind of brand and profile you have built over the 4 years in the high school, right? So those also play an important role. And then it's always important to have a safety net, right? Because things can go wrong, right? Because these processes are subjective, while the broader framework are available to all of us. There could be a situation where you might have the right credentials, still you can't make into the top universities you applied. So having 2 to 3 backup university also ensures you get the admission in the current cycle rather than waiting for a year, right? So I think that's also very interesting and important thing to keep check on.
Yeah, so you should have, as sir very rightly mentioned, having a safety is important. Safety is having your reach university, or you think you will surely get in this university, and then also having your upper reach and dream universities where you're stretching a little more, but if you get in, that's great. Okay, so having 2 to 3 dreams, nothing wrong with that. I would say two dreams is enough, like a real stretch. Then having upper reach is also good. Your largest chunk of university should be reach and higher reach, wherein you're trying to stretch a little more, but it's all within possibility. So if I apply to Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Caltech, Yale, Princeton, I might not hit any of them, because they're all really competitive universities. So you need to understand that having 1 or 2 dreams is fantastic. 3 could be the max limit. Again, most should be your reaches, about 3 to 4 or 5 reaches, and you should have 2 to 3 safeties as well, because when you have more safeties, if you're going to get into each of them, then you also have options at the end of the day to choose from. That I can choose between these 3 universities and then find which I want to go to for sure. So please have a holistic blend of all 3, and if nothing works out, 33.3% for all is the perfect way to go for it.
So Malay, thanks for helping us with that information, right? So looking back at your experience, right? So when did you start with your research process?
Correct. Yeah. So as I mentioned, even I started quite early on. The moment I decided I want to finally start going and studying abroad in my junior year, and say September, November is when I started the whole research process. I started penning down my thoughts, putting down all these items together. And the funnel system, like I mentioned, I started with research. The best resource to use is My Big Future on College Board. Go onto that website, you will be able to see all the main important details of your university, and then you can start adding them to your list, and then you can start segregating them into your target, reach, and safety. And that gives you a very concise, clear format of how you've done your research. And there's no limit. You could select 100 universities and then keep knocking them off one at a time, and then eventually come with your comprehensive list. So My Big Futures is something I would recommend to every student when you're just starting out with the process. The next step is to go to each university's website and then get a better understanding there, and then put your pros, your cons, your activities, your interests, your major, etc.
Right. And I think that's a valid point. There are a lot of free resources available, right? Where if you want to do it yourself, you can definitely go to these websites. If you need a professional help, there are counselors who can support you in the process, right? So either ways, the idea is to start early, right? So that you have ample time in terms of framing your mindset, building the right fit list, and then ensure you have the right bandwidth to apply, build your essays, build your story around it, right? So
Correct.
talking
Yeah.
about, like, you went into Dartmouth, right? So what were some of the factors that influenced your decision, and what were some of the other universities you applied as you narrowed down on your research?
Correct. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the five main factors which we spoke about before, they also had an influence on me when I applied to Dartmouth College. So as I've said, repute and name, while it does have an importance, it's not the be all end all. So number one for me was the major which was being offered. Economics and stats is a very popular double major in Dartmouth, so that's what made me keen to apply there. Number two, again, financially, it also plays a big role in your application. So you need to understand the intricacies between need blind, need aware, merit-based scholarships, need-based scholarships. So that too, Dartmouth has a wide range of aid, wide range of options in that field, which is why that was another choice of applying to that university particularly. Again, the community, the size, the class sizes, all of that, it's a very tight knit community. Professors are like equals with you. They're really friendly, really helpful. I asked a lot of my seniors who've gone to Dartmouth, and they all had positive reviews. So all of this kept inching me closer and closer to that university as my number one choice. Um, Moving on, also the class sizes, like I mentioned, they're quite small. So there's importance and focus given to each student. Another very big factor is that you need to understand the difference between huge public or huge private research-based universities, where as compared to liberal arts undergrad focused universities. So Dartmouth has a lot of importance to the undergraduate department, and it's primarily an undergraduate university. While it does have schools for your masters and above, it yet focuses a lot on undergrad. The professors' entirety of their focus in the research is towards the undergrad department, as compared to big schools like, for example, Harvard and all. They receive huge endowments for the research they do at a master's and PhD level. So you need to understand the differences between universities. And for me, Dartmouth, because of its focus on undergrad, was also an impetus to applying there. Another factor that takes a part in all of your thought process towards a university is the activities. Do you feel you're going to be at home when you're in those 4 years at your university, or you're going to enjoy the activities, the things that they do? So Dartmouth has a lot of importance on being outdoorsy and going for their Dartmouth outing club and things like that. Their center for social service, all the small parts which I feel were unique, which I could contribute to, is the reason why I applied that university eventually. Again, their alumni network, like I mentioned, do not take it for granted. They're one of the most fantastic alumni networks in the country. Any top university will provide you that, but Dartmouth particularly, I felt, had a really good alumni network. And these are all small factors which eventually influenced my decision to apply there. So I say always take into account what you feel is more valuable. For someone, extracurricular activities may be more important than just the particular major and the technicalities in the major. For someone, alumni network or class sizes may be more important than location and temperature. Now, people would say, am I crazy going to Dartmouth because of the extreme cold? From being someone in India to then going to a place where there's -20 and -25 Celsius climate. So that again plays a part. But in the overall scheme of things, is it that important to me? So you need to identify what is important, what is not. So I look at the cold as an opportunity to learn how to ski there, not necessarily to be freezing in the dormitories or in the campus. So you have to decide what is important to you, what is not, and then eventually put it
Right.
together and find the perfect choice. It's very difficult to come to the perfect choice, but if you're able to do that, that's wonderful. Or eventually just see what is the most important, and if you can tick that box, fantastic.
Makes sense, right? I think that's an interesting take in terms of the factor you chose in selecting different universities, and finally you made it to Dartmouth. So congratulations for that, right? So thanks, Malay, for sharing that inputs. So if we have to, contrast, because you talked about certain factors, right? So can we look at some universities and contrast them? For example, you talked about the weather, right? Which would be on one extreme versus on the other extreme. So I think based on the factors you shared, if you can help us with those contrasting comparison, that will also help our audience to understand better when they're making their choices.
Yeah, so it's very important to juxtapose different universities with one another and identify what you're eventually looking for. So just to give examples of one university compared to the other. So now the Ivy League, Dartmouth, Harvard, etc., versus say a University of Chicago. So one is need blind, the Ivy League is need blind, some other universities out there, and University of Chicago would be construed as need aware. So we'll get into the nitty-gritties of this again in a future podcast, but this is just to understand the differences. Now, University of Southern California versus again the Ivy League. One, the USC offers wonderful scholarships, the presidential scholarship, the trusteeship scholarship, whereas the Ivy League is more on the financial aid side of things. Whether that's need aware or need blind, that's again all financial aid. Now you have NYU versus say Cornell or Dartmouth. NYU is in the most urban location possible in New York. Cornell and Dartmouth would fall in more of a rural location, really far away. One is in Ithaca, one is in New Hampshire in Hanover. Then Arizona State University versus Yale. This is again size of the university. So Yale and Princeton are generally smaller universities. Again, even Dartmouth is a smaller university, whereas Arizona State University will find more than 50,000 students on campus together. So it again depends on what your preferences are. Do you want to meet people, new people every single day, or do you like your small community of people who you would know face to face and recognize daily? Now UNC Chapel Hill versus Amherst College. UNC Chapel Hill is a public university, Amherst College is a private university. Public and private, again, a lot of different factors involved in it. The tuition rate is different, the endowments, the funding, the scholarships, the aid, all of these have very varying factors involved in them. So it's important to understand that as well. Now, say this is again a very crude example. Take MIT on one side or any other Rutgers or something like that on the other side. Everyone would know that the academic rigor of MIT is unmatched. It's very difficult for students to cope up. And while it is challenging and beneficial in overall pushing you, it is a rigorous school in terms of academics, whereas Rutgers is more focused on sports and academics put together. So again, it depends on what you would like. Are you looking for a school which is only going to push you beyond your comfort zone in terms of studying, or you would want more of sports and a more relaxed format of learning? You've Wharton University of Pennsylvania, Wharton School of Business versus Caltech. Again, in Wharton, you're going to find business majors entirely. In NYU Stern School of Business, again, entirely business. Whereas in Caltech, you're going to find more majors in engineering and things like that. That doesn't mean NYU doesn't have a good field of engineering as well. Even they have schools for engineering, etc. But again, it's about which school you're going to and what major is it more predominant in or focused on. Again, Harvard versus Dartmouth. Harvard, I would say, is a very, very fantastic research-based university. Professors have wonderful research, they have huge endowments. They also focus a lot on masters and PhD. Dartmouth, on the other hand, is a smaller undergrad focused school. Professors focus morely on undergraduate teaching and somewhat lesser on the masters and the PhD side of things. So it depends on what stage of your uh, education are you going to pursue your future in the US. Is it masters, postgrad, undergrad, things like that. So these are some of the differences. Then there's again a lot of more differences in terms of climate and the state and whether you're close to your relatives, things like that. You could say Dartmouth, all the schools in the upper northeast would be freakishly cold, extremely cold, whereas universities say in the southern western side, say USC and schools like that would be generally warmer. So there's again preferences, what you want, what you think is important, and what you think could be important, but in the overall scheme of things doesn't necessarily play that much of a role. So identify
Right.
these small quirks and details and then make your choice.
Yeah, thanks, Malay. And what you said is not just true for US. I think it's also true where you want to study across the globe, right? Because the same
Perfect,
set
of
of
course.
factors can influence your choices out there, right?
Yeah.
So while we talk majorly on the US, if you are headed to a different country, so take your time, right, and do your research and start early on the research because it takes time to understand different kind of university and build your credentials. Because while you like a certain university, you need to have your credentials also built in, right? And remember there is also some decision making based on your instincts and gut, right? So remember, it's about finding a place where you can grow and thrive. It's not just about going to a top university. So until next time, this is Nishan Chawla signing off from the College Cat Postcard. Stay curious and keep exploring. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll just record. Thank you, Malay, for sharing your insight and experiences. And I think the factors you talk about are not just, okay, let me do it other way around. Uh, I think the factors you talked about are, while we majorly focus on US, they could be true when we are applying for the global universities, right? So you could be applying to any other locations. The same factor could really help you. So thank you, Malay, for sharing your insight and experiences today. Finding the right university, I believe, is a personal journey. There's no one size fits all. It takes time, so start your research early, trust your instincts, build your credential, right? You ultimately have to find a place where you can grow and thrive. So I wish you all the best. Until next time, this is your host Nishan Chavla signing off from the College Grad podcast. I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.